The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy, cutlery clinking, murmured conversations layered with occasional bursts of laughter, and the low hum of jazz streaming from a speaker hidden somewhere in the exposed brick wall. Luca's wasn't the fanciest Italian place in Seattle, but it had charm, warm lighting, mismatched chairs, and pasta that made even hardened locals pause to savor. Emily Carter moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing a tray of drinks while offering the kind of smile she had learned to manufacture years ago. Polite, soft, warm. Just warm enough to keep questions away. Her wrist throbbed under the weight of the tray. The bruise was spreading, hidden beneath the sleeve of her black blouse, tight and buttoned at the wrist. A little too tight, actually, but it was the only one that hid the purpling skin completely. She had dabbed extra concealer on her cheekbone before leaving home, just in case the swelling hadn't gone down. Table 6 needs refills on wine, called Nadia, the other waitress on shift. Got it, Emily replied, adjusting her tray. Table 6 was routine. A couple on date night, laughing too loudly, probably 2 glasses in. She welcomed routine. It was the unpredictable that hurt. It was the days when Zach didn't say anything but glared at her until her hands trembled. The nights when he slammed doors, broke plates, wrapped his fingers around her wrist so hard she gasped. But she didn't think about that now. Couldn't. When she approached table 9, her steps slowed. The men seated there didn't belong. Not that they were out of place by dress, suits clean and tailored, but there was a quiet control in the way they sat. One of them, the youngest, laughed at something on his phone. Another scrolled through emails. But the man at the center didn't move at all. He wasn't eating, not drinking. Just watching. Emily recognized him. Everyone in Seattle's underground did, even if they pretended not to. Julien Moretti. Owner of 4 restaurants, 2 lounges, and a luxury car dealership. Rumors swirled, old family money from New York, a connection to something larger. No one said Mafia anymore. Not out loud. But the stories stuck like gum under a barstool, too many to scrape off completely. Julian glanced up just as Emily reached the table. His mère. Sharp, unreadable. Good evening, gentlemen, she said, her voice steady. May I take your order? They rattled off a few dishes, quick and smooth. Julian didn't speak. He just watched her. Notin à l'Eringway. It was focused. Like he was studying a page of text in a language he already understood. As she wrote down the last entree, the tray shifted in her hand, the angle just wrong. Pain shot through her wrist and she winced, just slightly, a twitch of the eye. That's when Julian's eyes dropped to her sleeve. The cuff had ridden up by half an inch. His gaze flicked back to her face. She smiled automatically. That smile she had worn for years. The one that said, everything's fine. Don't ask. Please don't ask a point. Your wrist, he said suddenly. His voice was deeper than she expected. Calm, low, measured. Emily froze for half a second too long. Then, oh that? Cabinet d'or. My apartment has the worst hinges. One of the other men chuckled. Julian didn't. Right, he said quietly. She left the table as quickly as was polite. Back in the kitchen, she pressed her palm to her chest and breathed. 2 counts in. 4 counts out. Don't cry. Not here. Not for a look. A question. He didn't know anything. He just saw something. That's all. Still, she took extra care serving them. She returned with their wine. Delivered their plates. Refreshed their water. And every time, Julian watched her, not intrusively, just present. Noticing. When the table finally rose to leave, she expected him to go without a word. Men like that didn't ask. Didn't explain. But as she collected their empty plates, she found something tucked under the breadbasket. A business card. Matte black. Embossed letters. Julien Moretti. No title. Just a private number. And scrawled on the back, in small neat handwriting. If you ever need help opening any door, call this number. Her breath caught. Opening a door. He'd listened. Not just heard her lie about the cabinet door, he'd listened to it. Understood it wasn't about a cabinet. Understood it was the only story she could tell without breaking. She slipped the card into her apron pocket without a word. Later that night, walking home in the cold mist, Emily replayed the moment over and over. She didn't call. She wouldn't. Not yet. Back at the apartment, the lights were off.
The hairstyle we smoke.
She found Grace asleep on the couch, still in her school uniform, textbook open across her chest. Emily brushed a strand of hair from her sister's forehead. 13 years old. Too young to know everything, but too smart to ignore it. In the bedroom, Zach was awake. Sitting in the chair by the window, bottle of whiskey half empty on the floor. His eyes tracked her as she walked in. "You were late," he said. "It was busy. You looked different." "What do you mean?" His stare narrowed.
Like you were smiling too much.
"For someone who hates that job." She didn't respond. He stood. Walked over. His fingers brushed her cheek. Then her wrist. She flinched. That was enough. He didn't need words. He turned away, muttering something under his breath. She couldn't catch it all, but one phrase landed like a knife.
You think you're better than me now.
Emily sat on the bed, hands clasped tightly. The card was still in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. But for the first time in months, she knew it was there. Someone had seen her. Someone had offered a door. She just didn't know yet if she was ready to open it. Rain came down hard that Saturday night, the kind of cold, relentless drizzle that turned Seattle's streets into mirrors. Luca's was packed again, the warmth of the restaurant at odds with the chill outside. Emily moved through the noise like a ghost, silent and efficient, her smile more brittle than usual.
Every step hurt.
Zach had grabbed her arm that morning, nothing dramatic, just a warning squeeze that left her skin throbbing beneath her sleeve. She hadn't told anyone. She never did. Julian Moretti was back at table 9. Same seat, same calm posture, same quiet authority that made the other men at the table sit straighter, speak softer. When she saw him, her stomach twisted. She didn't know what frightened her more, the fact that he'd come back, or the strange relief that he had. When she approached, his eyes met hers briefly, acknowledging her with a small nod. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The air between them carried the memory of that card and the bruise on her wrist. For the next hour, she served and moved and smiled, each motion practiced and measured.
Outside, the rain beat against the windows.
The world felt fragile, as if one wrong word might crack it open. By the end of the night, just before closing, she slipped into the back room to count her tips. The door creaked open, and Marco, the manager, stuck his head in.
You've got someone waiting up front.
Says he's your boyfriend. Her hands froze around a handful of bills. What? Marco frowned. You want me to tell him you're still busy? Her throat tightened. No, it's fine. I'll talk to him. The moment she stepped into the dining area, she saw him. Zach stood just inside the entrance, soaked from the rain, tie loose, eyes glassy with alcohol. He looked like a storm contained in human form, ready to break. Zach, not here, she said quietly. I'm working. You didn't answer your phone, he said, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the chatter. I called you, 6 times? Please, she whispered.
Let's talk outside.
Customers turned to look. The hostess froze behind her stand. Marco stepped forward, uncertain, hovering in the middle distance like someone who wanted to help but didn't know how. Zach's jaw clenched. You think you can ignore me? You think you can walk around here smiling at men like that? Sir, Marco interrupted, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. Zach's eyes flicked toward him, hard and mean.
I'm not talking to you.
Then his hand shot out and grabbed Emily's wrist. The same wrist. His grip tightened until her vision blurred. She tried to pull back, but he yanked harder, dragging her toward the door. Zach, stop, she gasped.
You're hurting me.
Good, he hissed. The cold air hit them as the door swung open. The street was slick and empty. He pulled her into the alley beside the restaurant, the rain soaking through her clothes instantly.
Let me go. She shouted, voice breaking against the sound of the storm.
You think I don't see it? Zach snarled.
The way you look at them?
That guy with the suit, the one who left you that fancy tip. You think I don't know what that means? She pushed against his chest, but he was stronger. His hand went to her throat. Zach, please, the words came out as gasps. His forearm pressed harder, cutting off her air. The brick wall dug into her back. Pain flared behind her eyes. Everything slowed.
The rain blurred. The sound of her heartbeat drowned out everything else.
She thought of Grace, of her sister asleep on the couch, of the promise she'd made to protect her. And she thought of the card in her wallet, the words written in careful ink, if you ever need help opening any door. Then, suddenly, the pressure vanished.
Zach flew backward, crashing against the opposite wall.
Emily dropped to her knees, clutching her throat, choking on air. A figure stood at the mouth of the alley, still and composed despite the rain.
Julien.
He didn't move right away. His eyes were fixed on Zach, his face calm in a way that made it more terrifying than rage ever could be. You made a mistake, Julien said quietly. Zach stumbled to his feet, blinking through the rain.
Who the hell are you?
Julien took one slow step forward. Someone who doesn't tolerate men who touch women like that. You don't tell me how to, Zach started, but didn't finish. Two men appeared behind Julien, both in dark coats, both silent. One of them, older, solid, grabbed Zach by the arm and twisted it behind his back before he could react. Zach shouted, kicked, struggled, but the man's grip didn't falter. This is none of your business. Zach yelled.
She's my girlfriend.
Julien turned slightly, eyes flicking toward Emily. She was still kneeling, soaked, trembling. Their gazes met. He didn't say anything, but she saw the decision form in his eyes like a blade sliding into place. No, he said softly. She isn't. Then he nodded once to the man holding Zach. Wait, please, Emily tried to speak, but her voice was a rasp. Julien crouched beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder without touching. Can you breathe? He asked. She nodded, barely. Julien looked up. Luca. Take him.
The men dragged Zach toward a black SUV idling at the end of the alley.
His voice echoed in the rain. Emily. Tell them I didn't. The door slammed shut. The sound of the engine swallowed his words. Emily stared after the car until it disappeared. Julian's hand reached for her, steady and warm against her cold skin. Come on, he said quietly. You need to get inside. She didn't resist when he helped her stand. Her legs felt weightless, her body running on shock. He led her through the back entrance of the restaurant, where the kitchen staff had gone silent at the sight of them. Marco appeared, eyes wide. What happened? Are you okay? She's going home, Julian said before she could answer. His voice was calm but absolute, the kind of tone that didn't invite argument. Pay her for the rest of her shift. Marco nodded quickly. Emily tried to speak again. I can go by myself.
Julien shook his head.
Not tonight. Outside, his car waited. The same black SUV. The seats smelled like leather and rain. The city lights blurred through the tinted windows as they pulled away. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Julian asked, How long? Emily turned her head, throat burning. 6 months. Maybe longer. Why didn't you leave? She looked down at her hands, at the faint marks already darkening on her skin. Because it was easier to believe he'd change than to start over. Julian said nothing for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. My mother used to say that too. Emily glanced at him. He used to hit her, Julian continued. My father. I was a kid. I couldn't stop him. Not until I was old enough to make him afraid of me. His jaw tightened. He stopped then. But she'd already spent 20 years convincing herself that he didn't mean it. He looked at her. I swore I'd never let that happen again, to anyone. The car slowed to a stop in front of her building. The rain had turned to mist, the streets glistening under the dim orange glow of streetlights. Julian stepped out first, scanned the street with a look that belonged to someone who expected danger. Then he opened her door. Will you be safe here tonight? He asked. Emily hesitated. He won't come back. Julian's gaze didn't waver. No, he won't. Something in his tone made her look up. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. She should have been horrified. Should have demanded to know what take him meant. But instead, she felt something else. Relief.
Heavy and consuming.
The kind that filled the hollow spaces fear had carved out long ago. Julian waited until she was inside the building, until the door had closed behind her. Only then did he turn back to the car.
Upstairs, Emily leaned against the door, sliding to the floor.
The silence pressed in on her. Her throat ached, her pulse thudded in her ears. She touched her wrist, the bruise now joined by new marks, newer pain. Zach was gone. For the first time in months, the apartment was still. Grace slept in the next room, breathing steady. Emily looked at her phone. She didn't know if she should call the police, or Julian, or no one at all. But she knew one thing: the world had shifted. Something irreversible had happened. She wasn't sure if she'd opened a door tonight, or if someone had kicked it down for her. The silence didn't last. Zach's name was on the news 3 days later. Local man missing after dispute outside restaurant. Police seek witnesses. Girlfriend last to see him alive. Emily sat on the couch in their small apartment, the television screen flickering blue against the shadows. The volume was low, but the words still rang loud in her head. Grace sat beside her, legs pulled to her chest, eyes wide with questions she didn't dare speak aloud. Emily turned off the TV. Are they going to come here? Grace asked. I don't know, Emily answered honestly. What did you tell them? I said he was drunk. I said we argued. That I went back inside and he left. Grace looked at her sister. Do you think they believe you? I don't think they care enough not to. It was true. The officer who came to speak to her had taken a few notes, asked her to call if she remembered anything else, then left without another word. No threats.
No suspicion.
Just routine. Still, the feeling didn't leave her, that crawling awareness that someone was watching from the shadows. The headlines weren't just words. They were weights, pressing on her chest every time she tried to breathe. Julian didn't call. He didn't have to. He showed up the next night. Emily heard the knock and paused. It was late, past 10. Grace was already asleep. She opened the door slowly.
Julien stood there, alone, dressed in black, à calme et vert.
I won't stay, he said. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. She opened the door wider, wordlessly. Inside, he didn't sit. He stood by the window, glancing out once before turning back to her. The police won't follow up. Zach had priors. Assault. Drunk and disorderly. He was on a downward spiral. They'll write it off as a disappearance. Emily crossed her arms, her voice quiet. Did you kill him? Julian didn't answer right away. His eyes held hers without blinking. I don't make people disappear for fun, he said. But I don't let men like him walk away, either. She didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid of him, not in the way she had been afraid of Zach. This was different. Julian didn't raise his voice, didn't move with violence. He just existed in a space that didn't allow threat. You didn't ask for it, he said. But you also didn't stop it. So now you live with the space he left behind. Emily nodded slowly.
What happen now?
You move, Julian said. It's not safe here anymore.
I canta fort. Il est l'endelit.
She didn't argue. There were too many things to question, and none of the answers would change the truth. The apartment was no longer hers. Not really. The next morning, a black car picked her and Grace up. The driver, silent, efficient, loaded their 2 suitcases without comment. Grace didn't say much, but her eyes darted everywhere, cataloging details. Emily reached for her hand, and her sister didn't pull away. The house they arrived at was in a quiet suburb, nestled behind high hedges and an iron gate. It wasn't a mansion, but it was large, modern, and guarded. Literally. Cameras perched at every corner. A man in a dark coat nodded at them when they entered, then disappeared. Emily walked through the living room in stunned silence. Polished floors, neutral tones, a kitchen big enough to cook for 20. It was the kind of place that belonged to someone with power and secrets. Is this ours?
Grace whispered.
For now, Emily said. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. Grace took the one with the window facing the garden. Emily unpacked slowly, folding clothes into drawers she didn't own, in a house that wasn't hers, under the protection of a man she barely knew. Julian didn't stay with them. He visited once, briefly, just to check in. "You're safe here," he said. Emily studied his face. "Why are you doing this?" Julian looked out the window. "Because someone should have done it for my mother. Because the world is full of people who see and do nothing. And because I can." He paused. "If it makes you feel better, you can think of it as a debt."
One day, I might call it in.
Emily didn't like the sound of that, but she didn't push. Days passed. Grace returned to school. A private car picked her up and brought her home. She hated it. "I feel like I'm being watched all the time," she told Emily one night. "Like I'm in a really nice prison." "I know," Emily admitted. "Is this what your life with Zach felt like?" Emily hesitated. "Worse. At least here, no one's hurting us." Grace looked at her. "But someone still decides where we go, who drives us, who protects us. We're not free." "Not really." The words stung more than Emily expected. That night, she waited until the house was quiet, then called Julian. He answered on the second ring. "We need to talk," she said. He met her the next day at the back patio.
The air was crisp, the sky overcast.
"You said I was safe," she said. "But I don't feel free." Julian didn't react. "Would you rather be free and hunted?" "I'd rather have a choice." He studied her, then nodded once. "I can lift the security," he said.
No more driver.
"No more cameras. But if anything happens, I won't be able to guarantee your safety." She swallowed. "I'm not asking to be reckless. Just human."
Julien exhaled slowly.
"Fair enough." He turned to leave, then stopped.
"One of my men, Callum."
"He was supposed to keep your address off the record. He sold it. That's how Zach found you that night." Emily froze. "He's alive?" she asked. "For now." "What are you going to do to him?" "I haven't decided yet." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Don't kill him." Julian tilted his head. "He endangered you, Grace. He betrayed my trust." "I know," Emily said. "But if you want to be different from the men who hurt people, you don't get to be like them." Julian stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, just a flicker. "Your voice is steadier than it was a week ago." "I'm not the same person I was a week ago." He nodded. "I'll take that under consideration." Then he left.
That night, Emily sat by the window, watching the sky fade from grey to dark. The house was quiet.
But she wasn't. There was a storm brewing inside her, questions, doubts, and a strange, unfamiliar strength. She had stepped through a door. Now she had to decide what kind of world she wanted to find on the other side. 3 months passed. By then, the whispers about Zach had faded from public interest. His disappearance was classified as unresolved, another unsolved mystery in a city that didn't ask too many questions. Emily no longer felt the weight of his presence when she walked into a room. The bruises had healed. Her voice, once careful and soft, had gained shape again. Grace had adjusted to her new school, though she still resisted the black SUV that picked her up each morning. She insisted on walking the last few blocks alone, demanding a sliver of independence.
Emily later.
The house, with its wide halls and silence, had become familiar, though it never truly felt like home. It was a place between lives, between fear and freedom, between memory and movement. Julian visited less, though when he did, it was always brief and always on her terms. One afternoon, Emily opened the mailbox and found a thin white envelope addressed in clean printed letters. There was no return address. Inside was a formal letter and a brochure.
Global Medat International Aid Programme.
She read the first paragraph 3 times, her heart thudding harder with each pass. "We are pleased to offer you a place in our International Nursing Initiative, deployment to Jordan, Syria, or Lebanon, initial commitment of 18 months, beginning July." She sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in her hands. This had been a dream.
Before everything.
Before Zach.
Before the bruises and the fear and the silence.
Before her life had narrowed into survival. She'd applied to the program 2 years ago, back when she believed she could help people beyond her own small corner of pain. When she'd believed in something bigger than herself. She thought they'd forgotten her. Or rejected her. But here it was. When Grace got home, Emily showed her the letter. Her sister read it in silence, then looked up.
So, are you going?
I don't know, Emily said honestly. Why not? Because it's dangerous. Because I'd be gone a long time.
Grace shrugged. You've always done things for me.
You stayed because of me.
Don't not go because of me.
Emily blinked, surprised. I didn't stay just because of you. Yes, you did, Grace said, not unkindly. You stayed to make sure I was safe. Now I'm safe. So go do what you wanted to do before everything else happened. Emily folded the letter back into the envelope, but didn't respond. That night, she called Julian. He arrived the next morning. They sat in the sunroom, light filtering in through tall windows. Julian wore gray, his jacket neatly pressed, his expression unreadable as always. She handed him the letter. He read it once, then folded it and set it on the table between them. That's a good program, he said. I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. Why would I? Because it's dangerous. Because I'd be leaving. Julian leaned back slightly. You've survived worse than danger. And you're not mine to keep. His words surprised her. You once told me, she said slowly, that you helped because someone should have helped your mother. Because no one did. Julian nodded. So now I have a chance to help someone else. But I don't know if I'm going because it's right, or because I don't know what else to do. Do you need to know? He asked. Isn't it enough that you want to go? Emily looked down at her hands.
Parof me wonder if I'm running away.
Maybe you are, he said. But sometimes we need distance to see ourselves clearly. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Julian reached into his coat and pulled out a small black velvet pouch. He set it on the table. I don't do promises, he said. But this is as close as I can get. She opened the pouch. Inside was a simple silver ring, small and elegant, with a flat band and no stone. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't romantic. But it was intentional. If you leave, I'll understand, Julian said.
If you come back, you'll be here.
Emily closed the pouch and held it in her hand. She didn't speak. There was too much to say. 2 weeks later, she boarded a flight to Jordan with a backpack, a notebook, and a heavy heart. The work was exhausting. Days stretched into endless hours of heat, chaos, and triage. Emily found herself stationed near the Syrian border, assisting in a makeshift clinic where supplies were short and patients shorter. But she came alive there. She remembered how to move without fear. She remembered how to listen to stories without absorbing their pain. The nurses she worked with were fierce and kind, from all corners of the world. At night, they sat under string lights and told stories, shared food, sang songs from places Emily had never been. Once, while treating a little girl with a deep cut across her palm, Emily found herself humming, softly without thinking. It wasn't until the girl smiled that she realized what she'd lost in Seattle wasn't just safety. It had been joy. Back home, Grace wrote emails every week. Sometimes she sent photos. Her first school dance. Her science fair project. Julian made brief appearances and updates, still distant, still quiet, but always nearby when needed. 18 months passed. Then 24. On the 25th month, Emily returned. She stepped out of the airport into the soft gray drizzle of Seattle spring. The city hadn't changed much. But she had. The house was still there. Still guarded. Still silent. She knocked. It was Julian who answered. He looked older, only slightly. Less guarded, more grounded. They didn't speak at first. He opened the door wider.
Let her step inside.
There were new paintings on the walls. One of them, a watercolor of 2 hands almost touching, caught her eye. Grace picked that one, he said. She says it reminds her of you. Emily smiled. They sat down in the same sunroom, the same light pouring in through the windows. Julian studied her face. Did you find what you were looking for? I think I found what I needed, she said. Even if I didn't know I needed it. He nodded. She pulled the black pouch from her coat pocket. Set it on the table. I kept it, she said.
The whole time.
Julian didn't touch it. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know. They sat in silence. Then finally, Emily said, I'm not sure what happens next. Julian looked at her, voice calm. That's the beauty of it. Now you get to decide. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. Inside, for the first time, Emily felt the stillness not as a weight, but as a beginning. Emily didn't move back into the house. After a few days of staying in the guest room and catching up with Grace, she told Julian she needed her own space. Not out of distance, but because she had come back different, and this time she wanted to build a life that was hers from the ground up.
Julien understood.
He didn't argue, didn't ask her to stay. He simply nodded and offered to help her find a place. She declined the offer. Instead, she found a small apartment above a bookstore near Capitol Hill. The floors creaked, the windows stuck in their frames, and the kitchen was barely large enough to cook a proper meal, but it was hers. She furnished it slowly, buying things secondhand or from weekend markets, furniture that didn't match, plates with chips, a kettle that whistled too loudly. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a life she had chosen. She started working at a community health clinic, offering trauma support and basic medical services to women in vulnerable situations. Some of them reminded her of who she had been. Others reminded her of who she had feared becoming. She didn't offer them miracles.
Juste présence.
Just someone who wouldn't look away. Every so often, she saw Julian. He would come to the clinic's fundraising events, never staying long, always quiet in the background. Sometimes he left large anonymous donations. Once, he dropped off a shipment of medical supplies from one of his companies without attaching his name. She knew it was him. He never said a word about it. One evening, nearly 6 months after her return, Emily found herself standing outside Luca's, the old Italian restaurant where it had all begun. The new management had renovated the front, but the alley remained the same, narrow, damp, lined with brick. She stood there for a long moment, remembering the night that changed everything. The fear, the pain, the silence being torn apart by someone who chose to see her when she didn't know how to be seen. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply turned and walked away. That night, she received a message from Julian.
Come by the center tomorrow.
I have something you should see. She arrived the next morning to find him standing in the main hall of a building she hadn't seen before. It wasn't his office, nor was it part of his restaurant empire. It was something else entirely.
The sign above the entrance read, The Haven Project.
Inside, the space was still under construction, walls half-painted, boxes everywhere, but the vision was clear.
A wellness center.
Medical care, counseling, legal aid, job training.
All under one roof.
Julian led her through the rooms, explaining the model, the programs, the funding. But mostly, he let her take it in. You built this? She asked. With the right people, he replied.
I'm not the heart of it.
Just the engine. She stood in one of the counseling rooms, looking at the bare walls. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to run it. Emily turned. Me? You've lived it. You've healed from it. You've helped others do the same. You know what it's like to fall and still find a way forward. This place needs that. I'm not a therapist. You don't have to be. You'll hire the right people. Build the right team. What matters is that the center has a soul. And you've got one that people trust. She looked around the space again. It was overwhelming. Too big. Too real. But at the same time, it felt right in a way nothing else had since she returned. She nodded once. Okay. I'll do it. Julian didn't smile, not in the usual way. But there was something in his eyes, approval, respect, maybe even pride. Over the next few months, Emily poured herself into the work. The Haven Project became her second home. She met with contractors, recruited staff, designed outreach programs, and created partnerships with local shelters and hospitals. Grace volunteered on weekends, helping organize supplies or sitting with kids during therapy sessions. For the first time in years, they were both part of something larger than themselves.
One evening, as Emily looked up the center, she found Julien waiting by the door.
I thought you didn't do office visits, she said.
I'm not here for the center.
They walked together down the quiet street. Spring had arrived in Seattle, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and blooming cherry blossoms. Julian stopped beneath a tree. You once asked me if I thought you were running away. I remember. You weren't, he said. You were becoming. And I think you still are. Emily glanced at him.
What about you?
I'm learning, he said. To be still. To be useful. To let things go. She looked at him for a long moment. Do you regret what you did to Zach? No, he said. But I regret that it had to be done. There was no anger in her response.
Just understanding.
The world they had survived was full of ugly truths. Regret wasn't always about wrong choices. Sometimes it was about necessary ones. They kept walking. Eventually, she said, Do you still have it?
The ring.
Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the black velvet pouch. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. The ring was just as she remembered, plain, unassuming, without embellishment. She held it in her hand. I don't know what this means yet, she said. But I know what it doesn't mean. He waited. It doesn't mean saving me. It doesn't mean owning me. It doesn't mean forgetting what we've both been through. Julian nodded. Then whatever it does mean, I'll take it. Emily looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she slid it into her pocket. Not worn. Not refused. Just held. They walked on, neither of them rushing toward an ending. Because maybe this wasn't a story about rescue. Maybe it was a story about return. And healing. And starting again. On her own terms. In her own time. With her own strength.